Can you guys hear me anyways?
Yes. I can crank it up a little bit for you.
Sure.
But yeah, you just have to get closer to the mic. You want to hold it?
Check.
I mean, I prefer not. It was working when I was talking a minute ago, right?
I prefer not to use the mic at all. Hello? Maybe I need to use my man voice. Hello?
Oh, you are?
What's up? I'll be fine without it, I think. I hope. Hello? Can you guys hear me now? Is it getting any louder?
Try again.
Can you guys hear me now? That sounds a little better. There you go. Woo, hey Kyle. Hey Adam. Thanks Adam. Appreciate it. I need to get very close to the mic. All right, thanks. Hey guys, thanks for coming out to listen to mine and Matt's talk. The talk was called From X to Totally Pwned. X was just a placeholder. I'm not really creative, so I didn't think of a better name. I'm going to cover stuff that I use for broadcast messages. Matt Smith's going to go over something else. I'm not going to give away his secret sauce for a little bit later. But I do appreciate y'all coming out. This is a little about me. My name is Russell. I'm a security analyst with Sword and Shield. There I do network vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. This is my first time speaking, and it sucks. I don't really like speaking in front of people. Go with, I don't know if you guys are right here with, was it Kevin Johnson? No, not Kevin Johnson. Kevin Thomas. Kevin Thomas out here, he sweats a lot. I sweat a lot too. I'm not bald though. I got plenty of hair. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm also a member of the Tennessee Air National Guard. For my career out there, it has nothing to do with computers. I did about 10 years in the military loading bombs on aircraft and doing aircraft maintenance. I'm doing some transitioning now, but that's where I work. I'm also a SANS MSIE, MSISE. It's the Masters of Information Security Engineering student. This talk was actually based off of that. I had to write a gold paper for one of my classes about, it was more focused on Netbios, but this is kind of more abstracted on top of that. I'm a father of two. I got a son and a daughter, and just a wife to one right now. Might change later though. This is my. No, you're not. Come see me afterwards in the alley out back. This is my email. If you want to hit me up about anything about this talk or just anything in general, you can find me on Twitter at NeonDog is the handle I go by. I don't tweet too much unless I think it's really important, but I'm not usually on there flapping my gums. But again, hit me by email anytime you want to. I have no idea what I'm doing, so don't listen to me. I'm glad you came, but I'm just advising you not to listen to. This is my disclaimer, my get out of jail free card. If I say something wrong, I told you already that I don't know what I'm talking about, so that's what you get. But all seriousness, when you hear someone tell you something, go verify for yourself, find out your own things. I'm only human. I promise I'm not perfect, despite what I think about myself. If you notice a mistake in this, please let me know, and I'll look it up and try and figure out how we can work together. The stuff I'm going to talk about today is not new. It's been discussed many times over the past, but I've continued to find it useful, so I thought that I would share it with you guys. This is how I pwn right here. I just get on the keyboard and I start banging away. Like Travis was saying earlier at the keynote, you get information, you share it. Well, over a couple of years of doing this pen testing, this is a technique that I use, and like I said, it routinely works for me. I do it without fail on every network I get on, so I thought that I would share it with everyone else. Like I said, it's not new, but I thought you might find it useful, so I thought I'd share it. Actually, one cool thing about when I hack like this is there's no exploits needed for what I'm about to show you. I don't exploit anything, except for maybe human weakness, but I'll get to that later. Have you guys all heard there's no place like home? 127.0.1. It's a great idea, but I prefer this instead. There's no place like broadcast. I like to hear everything instead. Just found that tweet on Twitter. I thought it was pretty nifty. Let's talk about these broadcast messages. Who all knows what broadcast messages are on a network? Good number of you. It's kind of actually misleading a little bit. Some of my stuff isn't actually broadcasting. If you look down at the LLMNR, it's actually a multicast address, but every host on the network sees it anyway, so my book it counts as broadcast because you're going to see it. But for this, the messages on a network go to every host, and that's what makes this attack beautiful. I just plug into someone's network, and I can see these messages that I'm about to talk to you about and share with you. The primary one is Netbios and LLMNR. Netbios and LLMNR, they both go off when they're typically looking for a resource. They're trying to resolve a name of some sort. There's the RFC numbers for Netbios. Netbios is ancient, but it's still dependent on some Windows computers, but it benefits me when I get to see it. When I was talking about Netbios and LLMNR, this is the kind of the order of operations when your host decides to send a broadcast message. The important thing to note is old Netbios applications use this Netbios API order, but everything that's modern day uses this Windows Socket API. I failed when it came to putting the right number of stars here for the double star for the LLMNR. Windows XP doesn't actually have that capability, so if you're talking about a Windows XP, there is no LLMNR with it. But this is the order of operations, and I'll cover this slide again at the end when we talk about mitigation, but it's important to know that when it's trying to find a resource, it gets down here and it starts sending out broadcast messages looking for that resource if it can't find it at all. This is what the Netbios messages look like on a network. I just obviously filtered it down. You can see right here it's looking for WPAD resource. This one's looking for one called MonsterMind, Skynet, Cyberdyne, Zoltan. All those are just stuff that was just on the network. They were just broadcast messages that were kind of going on. And this is the link local multicast name resolution doing the same thing, just kind of looking for resources on the network. Man, these slides are going fast. Let's see what's next. Oh, in comes WPAD. So this is my technique that I use. Again, not new, but WPAD stands for Web Proxy Auto-Discovery. How many of you here use Windows machines at work or at home or anywhere? This is a nice little feature that comes with Windows. It's on by default. In Windows XP, it's not on by default, but all the operating systems since then, it's on by default. It is an actual protocol standard. You can find it there. It's an IETF draft that expired. It never actually made its way all the way through, but Microsoft still uses it anyways. WPAD talks about how a host gets obviously auto-discovered onto a network. And it can do it one of two ways, through DHCP. That's DHCP option 252. You can set it in your DHCP router, and it will configure your WPAD setting. But what almost happens is discovery is done by DNS. And if we go back to that one slide, this one right here, this is again where we get into the DNS name resolution. What's going on there? When you look for WPAD, what it's trying to do is it's trying to find the proxy autoconfig file, and that's part of the standard. And for Windows, that file is called the wpad.dat file. The pack file says, hey, how do I configure myself? Actually, let me back up one second. For the WPAD, what happens is when you look at any network, like you saw these back here, you just see these broadcasts going out for WPAD. And your computers all do this now unless you went and manually changed it, which you probably haven't, or your corporation has. But it's just constantly broadcasting out, looking for this WPAD thing. And if it ever gets an answer back, it'll get this pack file. And in that pack file, it will tell it how to configure itself. So constantly your networks are going, hey, how do I configure myself? And it gets no response, so it just fails open. But if it ever does get a response, it'll ask next for the wpad.dat. So it'll try and resolve WPAD doing Netbios or LLMNR. It'll get back an answer, and then when it does that, then it'll go to that host and try and get the wpad.dat. This link down here at the bottom, the find proxy for URL, that right there has everything you ever wanted to know about WPAD and the pack file. It's where I go to get all my information from on it. The pack file itself is honestly just JavaScript put into a condensed form. This is what it looks like on your Windows box. Right here's the settings where you go in, you just check LAN settings, and you come in here. And this is by default, again, to just auto-detect proxy settings. I thought about standing up like a little wireless access point and seeing how many people connected to it so I could see all who was looking for this, but there's a good chance that you have this Windows feature enabled. But so these messages are broadcasting on the network, and like I said, this is a technique I use to own people with. They're on the network, so now the question is, how do I take that to my benefit, and what do I do with it after that? In comes a tool by Laurent at Trustwave. He wrote this tool called Responder, and it does a lot of things, but it's the tool that I use to perform this attack with. Right here's a little introduction from his GitHub page, and obviously a link to get it. But this tool's been invaluable to me. Here's some more resources about using Responder. Again, I'm not going to go give you a talk on how to use Responder, but the guy that wrote the tool put out a buttload of blog posts about how to do it. So if you want to know more about the tool itself, you can go there and find out about it. Let's take a look at it in action. So what we got going on here is, yeah, I can't actually see it. I'll get to cut that off a little bit. But up here, this host right here was looking for that WPAD I was telling you about earlier. It's just broadcasting, looking for name resolution, looking for WPAD. This is output from responder, by the way. And it got an answer. Like it says, it answered it back. It deploys an answer back. It told it that it was me. It said, I'm the WPAD that you're looking for. And then after that, it said, oh, great, you're the WPAD I'm looking for. Can you give me the file to configure myself? And in responder, there's a flag you can set that says force authentication. So when it asked me for that WPAD.dat file, I said, yes, you can have it. I'm just going to need your password first before you can have this thing. So that's what happens right here. You try to get it, and then I get back NTLM v2 challenge response hash back from the thing. So that's how I just hop on the network. I listen for broadcast messages, and then you ask for a file. I say, yeah, here it is. Give me your password, and I get it. One thing that's important to note about this is that this is a NTLM challenge response hash. It's not a straight up NTLM hash like you would get out of a registry. You can't pass this. This isn't something you can pass. This is the username, the domain. This is the challenge response number that's used. Whenever you're doing hacking, any tool will set it to this way by default because there's rainbow tables that are built off of this number right here. And then this right here is just a giant security blob of data. And then what you do with this is you just feed it to John or Hashcat and you start cracking the password. If you give this to Hashcat, it only takes the first 106 spots off of the security blob, so you have to trim this down to just the first 106 to start messing with that to crack the password. Let's see, this down here, so this right here was me spoofing WPAD, but I was talking about, this talk was kind of supposed to be more about broadcast messages in general. This down here was a spoof request. Someone was looking for a Netbios name of my share. Have you guys ever had a file share mounted on your network, and then that file share got like deprovisioned, but your host is still looking for it? That comes in handy for me too. Again, you don't realize it, but your computer is still in the background asking for that file share. And I've had that on a couple of hosts or a couple of clients where I connect to the network and someone's computer is looking for a file share that maybe they used to be on. Also, there's this thing called the Windows Redirector service. Have you ever like opened up Start Run and typed a name of something, or went to an internet browser, the spot where you type in an address and you start typing like a word? Well, the first thing that happens when you hit that, if you just type in a full word that's not a fully qualified domain name, is it sends out a request on the network with LLMNR and NetBIOS doing a request. So again, it can answer that back as well. That's a different flag. It's the -R flag in responder. He makes note that if you use it, it'll possibly break stuff, which it has. I was doing a customer once, and I ran this up, and it was going, and then I hear the network admins in the next room saying, stuff's not working, it's going down. I'm like, whoops, and I quit what I'm doing. And everything started working again, but let's see. I mentioned earlier that you can't pass this. I don't know if you guys have heard of pass the hash techniques, or actually, guys, anyone heard of pass the hash? You can't pass this, but you can use what they call relay, and it's where you kind of man in the middle of the connection. You tell someone you want a resource, and then you pass it off to someone else. And this works easier with NTLM v1. Metasploit itself has built-in functionality to do relaying. Supposedly, you can use Impacket's library to do NTLM v2 challenge response passing. What time is it? Okay. Again, so the real vulnerability here, like I told you, there's no vulnerabilities. I'm not using any vulnerabilities. I'm not exploiting anything. I just look on the network for broadcast messages. Your networks are probably all doing this now. I bet that you could go back to your office right now, just pop open anything you can use for sniffing the wire and look for anything for this, and you'll see this on your network. And you can also collect your coworkers' passwords and then crack them and log in as them too. Let's see. Oh, anyway, I was going to say the real vulnerability here is weak passwords, because if you had a really strong password and I try and crack it, I'm still not going to get anywhere. But I'll tell you, time has proven to me and shown that people still pick dumb passwords, and it works out to my advantage every time.
So what is your threshold for dumb?
Password.
I mean, like, if you get non-dictionary words past 36 bytes, you're like, yeah.
Well, in my opinion, the length is what really matters. If you have a 13-character long password, it's better than a 10-character random whatever. My rule of thumb is that if the password's 8 digits or less, it's going to get cracked in a day by anybody. From 8 and that point forward, it starts working out in your benefit. But if I ever see like a 20-character password hash, that's a good password. You can also do this with Metasploit. Responder is not the only tool you can use if you're heavy on Metasploit and you like using it. You can use this Netbios responder tool to do the same thing. And there's also what LLMNR responder tool built into Metasploit too that will do all the same stuff. And here's a example of me doing spoofing for that stuff too. Responder can do other things too, like I was saying, once you get that hash back. But if you remember, I told you that it asked for that file, wpad.dat, on how to configure myself. Well, when you successfully give that to the host and they configure themselves, you just told that victim that you're also the web proxy. So all the web traffic starts coming through you. I typically don't use this method because I just want the password. I don't want anything else. But if you use it long enough and someone logs into a web page with a cookie, the cookies will start showing up on the screen. You can use those cookies and just log in as them with that too. But Responder has this built-in web page too. So what you do is you just captive portal redirect them when they start connecting to you. So if you have Responder, you got in the middle, they took your wpad.dat file, you redirect them to this built-in web page. It looks like this. How many people do you think would click and download that link if they couldn't get to Facebook no more? Probably every single last one of them. And you just have them download this executable, you just generate a payload, and then have them go from there. Have any of you heard of Beef, Browser Exploitation Framework? You can also probably just put a Beef hook in this web page, and once they stop by and just view the page, then you'll have them hooked with Beef, and you can just kind of go on from there too. So there's some other avenues to kind of use Responder. Slade is kind of pimping out a blog post that I did, and it wasn't originally part of my talk, but I thought I'd include it anyways. So I got a password hash earlier using that WPAD attack, and I've successfully cracked it. Sometimes I'll crack 2 or 3 or 4, like Slade was talking about. I just need 1. That's all I need. So as long as I got 1 password hash for any user, I'll kind of take that and I'll use it to escalate my privileges to more on the domain. This is a blog post that I did. If you go to our company website at swordandshield.com/blog, you can read it there. I'm not going to go over like in depth about it, but I take that local password that I have and I log into a machine, and as long as they're running as a local admin, which they usually are, or if I've previously caught a domain admin cred using WPAD, then I'll use Mimikatz to log in and get passwords out of clear text. How many people know what Mimikatz is? Mimikatz is a tool that takes, it gets uploaded into Windows memory, and all your Windows computers store your password in a way that can be simply reversed out of memory, and it grabs for me the clear text password out of memory. So I'm no longer getting a password hash, I'm actually getting your real password. So if you had a 20 character long password, I'm getting it out of memory just as you typed it in to the keyboard. This guy down here, he's the one that wrote the tool. And then I use a PowerShell version of it. Someone ported it over to PowerShell. But I just go in, and this is a big blob of text. What I do is, this is in PowerShell. Do you guys use PowerShell for administration? Because if you don't, you should. It's really awesome. This is a big loop where I go in and I feed it a list of targets right here. And then I just log into every host on the entire network. Again, like Slade was talking about in his talk. You log into every host on the network. From here, I'm downloading my Mimikatz PowerShell script into memory. This all happens in memory too, so forensically there's no files on disk. This all happens in memory. I'll log into the system using psexec. I upload this Mimikatz, I execute the Mimikatz, and then I dump the output to a file on the network share. That's my network share where the file is. And then what you'll end up having in there is, like 20, 50 files with the people's clear text passwords. They'll look like this. This is the output from a Mimikatz run. You can see right here, here's the guy's password right in clear text. And then what I ended up doing is I had all these files. I had like 20, 50 files with just people's passwords in it. And it's more than one user, by the way. It's every user that's logged into that box whose password you can get out of memory, not just the person whose account you got onto. It's everyone's. So if you hit like a terminal server, an exchange server where everyone's logged into, you get all their passwords out of memory. Well, I got tired of looking through that file one by one trying to find everyone's password. So I wrote a Python script that goes through and parses it all out and gives you all this condensed information. But if you want to read more about it, just go to the Sword and Shield blog page and you can read about the attack. So,
Talk about PowerShell and AV real quick. Because AV will catch Mimikatz and try to run it on the system.
Yeah, again, that's the beauty of this. Like he was saying, well, because you're using PowerShell, which is a trusted executable on the box, and you're doing this all in memory, the AV doesn't really see what's going on to begin with. If you had to use the executable, there's a .exe version you can use. If you upload it to the machine, AV will catch it and then run it. But this string right here, IEX download string, you can use that to download any PowerShell module into memory. I routinely use it to download PowerView and PowerSploit and all that kind of stuff right into memory when I compromise someone's a host. So you can use that to download anything into memory, and no one will ever know it's even on the box to begin with. Quickly, I'll go over remediation. I was talking about, so I just hop on the network. I answer these broadcast messages for missing file shares, for stuff that you typed into your Windows Internet Explorer browser. And I answer it back, and then I just get your password hash, and then I crack it. And then I do that mass Mimikatz to kind of own your domain. When I did that Mimikatz attack I wrote that blog post, I ended up getting forest level admin password. So I completely got the whole forest after that. If we talk about remediation, you really just, if you want to stop broadcast message spoofing, you want to stop anywhere along this chain of events that you can stop it. So the first thing it does is check localman, the DNS, then does a DNS query. So DNS is unicast. It goes straight to the DNS server. It's not a broadcast message. So if you had a WPAD entry in your DNS server, it'll get answered and it'll no longer be a broadcast message on your network or anything. Let's see what else I got. To stop WPAD itself, you just go back and change this little checkbox right here. You're going to check that bad boy, and you'll no longer be sending out WPAD. But if you have like a file share or something like that, you'll still be broadcasting that out.
What about disciple Netbios?
You can. I've never done network administration on a large scale for a big organization, but I've been assured many times over that you couldn't actually do that in a large organization because their apps would crap out and the business would stop. Yeah, you could, but if you look at this slide right here, I'm actually answering link local multicast name resolution. It's kind of hard to cut off over there, but yeah, you disabled NetBIOS, but I'll just use the LLMNR instead. But if you had NetBIOS disabled, when you go back to that stack, then obviously you can kind of remove that whole column. You just cut out the NetBIOS portion of it, but let's see. If you wanted to stop the Mimikatz thing, people have asked me how you stop it. Supposedly Windows 10 is going to have like a protected mode that's going to stop it. But in the meantime, if you use non-interactive logins, then the passwords won't be stored in memory. And then supposedly Windows 8.1 in 2012 have a /restricted admin that doesn't store your password in memory when you remote connect to a box. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? What do I? Yeah, I'm not sure what the scope is. I mean, like I said earlier, the weakness here is really people's passwords, and people have long passwords, but they're still words in a dictionary, so any decent word list will kind of get through, and I only need one. So even if I capture 10, 15 hashes, I just need one of them is all I need. What do I recommend for password lengths? I go all out. My passwords are like 30 characters long, and I could never remember them, and I use a password manager. If you asked me to log into my Gmail right now, I couldn't do it without my password manager. But getting your mom to do that's probably never going to happen, so.
So complexity is important as
well. Well, no, in my opinion, if you had a password that was 30 characters long and was all A's, I'd still put that over any 14-character complex password any day in my book. You're talking about if it's 14 characters long? Yeah, if you're using Windows XP, which I hope you're not, and you have a password, if you have a password less than 14 characters, it'll store LM hash, but all modern operating systems don't actually store LM hashes. And then back to this over here with the broadcast messages, you can actually capture LM hashes. And if you're on a Windows network that has Windows XP, and you can capture LM hash, it's an instant win because there's rainbow tables for the LM hash version of this challenge response method, and you can crack that real quick, especially if any LM. If you can crack an LM hash like that. You just go to any good website and put it in there, and it'll give you back the answer for it.
So I'm sort of interested in when you go out in the field to various sites, what are you seeing? The LMV1 is on, and you see like these passwords, and I guess it's sort of the heuristic, it's sort of like what do you recommend for a password? It's sort of like when you walk in the door, what do you typically see? You just go, I got this.
I'm not sure where you're going, but
well, I mean, the idea is like, how bad is it in the field when you really go out there? I mean,
that's
a better sample set than I do.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That's why I'm sharing this with you. Like, if I'm on any pen test and I'm not owning anybody, I do this and win most times. It's only not worked for me a couple times. There was one organization that actually had a proxy set, so I was hosed. Like, I couldn't answer people's WPAD requests because there was none because it was already being answered. But on average, I always collect hashes from someone's network, and only once or twice I've not been able to crack a hash in a time given, but Like I said, that's why I'm sharing this with you. This is my go-to move. When I'm doing a pen test and I want on your network, I do this. No exploits are involved. Even better, when I told you earlier that you asked for the wpad.dat file and it gives it to me and I say, yeah, you can have it, I just need your password. You as the end user see nothing. You absolutely see not a single thing happening in front of you. I'm just silently sitting on your network collecting people's hashes and none the wiser on what's going on. Responder does have a different FlyU concept that supposedly pops up a box where you can type in your password, like it's just a Windows authentication box, and it will give it back to you in clear text. But this is my go-to move, and I routinely use it over and over again.
So the lameness threshold in the password universe right now is the cutoff's more like 14, it sounds like. I mean,
yeah, 12.
Anything better than 14 in the wild that the customers use.
Yeah, I have. But when I use Mimikatz and I pull people's passwords out of memories, this last client I did, they all had outstanding passwords. Every single last one of them was outstanding. But that one I did actually use the exploit for. But I got onto Mimikatz and loaded it and pulled their passwords straight out of memory. So once I can execute code on your system as system, it doesn't matter what your passwords are because I'm just going to pull them out of memory anyways. Anyone else got any questions? No. I give you all Matt Smith next. He's going to do his talk. Let me exit out this one. Thanks.
Thank you.
What's up? I couldn't see the cursor up there to close out the box.
They just do your little piece. So if you've ever wondered what a pen tester does during a test, or even better, what's in the mind of a pen tester as he's doing the test, well, first of all, you probably don't want to go there. But second of all, maybe this will give you a better idea. So this is a presentation about a real exploit chain that I found on a customer engagement. So I perform lots of vulnerability assessments and penetration tests, and this was one of the more interesting ones that I've done, and you'll see why. So I kind of want this to be interactive. If you have questions, ask. But I also want to ask you questions, and if you answer to my satisfaction, you'll get a choice of a candy bar, or maybe if I really like your answer, you might get a book. And I think these were donated by No Starch Press. There's a couple of books up here. So first I'm going to reveal a super secret hacker tool that I like to use on all my assessments. So this is part of every data discovery phase that I do during an assessment. It's a powerful tool. I mean, it really is. And you can find all kinds of interesting stuff out there on the internet with it. So who is not familiar with Pastebin? Anybody not familiar with it? Okay, good. So I often incorporate my Google searches with the Pastebin site. And for those who may not know and just didn't raise their hand or whatever, out of embarrassment, Pastebin is really intended to post things like code snippets, things, trying to be helpful, sharing type site. But it's used by bad guys in a big way to publicize all kinds of things. They like to brag and get their stuff out there. So it's really an interesting site to go out there and look through and see. You can find companies that have been hacked and how. And so I use it all the time just for entertainment. And for my lack of a better term, voyeurism, I like to see what's going on out there, and but anyway, so there's lots of pwnage out on this site. Now here's the cool 0-day exploit I found during this assessment. It's a code snippet on Pastebin. And I found it with a Google search of just the target's name, and then just using a directive of site:. So I did site:"pastebin.com. So what this is it's Lotus Domino procedure calls. And in the redacted sections here, there were some interesting values that I found. One of which was obviously related to the Google search, the target name. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Lotus. It goes by a number of different names. Domino, you'll hear Lotus Notes, you'll hear IBM Notes. It is an IBM product. I believe the Lotus company started it and IBM bought it. It's an older product, but I've actually run into it a bit lately, like a good bit. So it is still out there being used. And think of it like, so it has things like mail servers and databases and so forth. So think of it as kind of like a SharePoint, if you're familiar with Microsoft SharePoint. So when I found that, I got pretty excited, but I did a little further exploring with some more Google searches to figure out what in the world was this code doing. So I found a diagram on the Java Application Programming Interface, or API. So that's just a little diagram that shows an API, which is quite frequently used to access sites. In addition to, say, if it was a website with a browser, they might have an API, a way to call a site through programming. So one of the snippets lines of code had create session. So I found out the first parameter actually identified the computer containing the server. Cool. There were two other interesting fields though, and after further searching, I found out that it was a name and a password into what's called the Domino directory. Well, think of the Domino directory as kind of like LDAP, the lightweight data access protocol. So it's just a store of information. So in this case, it was users and their passwords. All right, so now we can actually go back to this snippet of code with the information we found and kind of fill in the blanks. And so you see the first parameter was actually a web server. The second was a user. The third was a password. This is the login page for the associated website. So my first question is, by looking at this site, what kind of improvement do you think could be made to this site? You see just a login page, username and password. What could be? How could we better improve the site? Boom! Who said that? Excellent. I didn't say anybody was excluded from playing the game. Maybe I will say, though, only one win. Yeah, you get only one reward. Okay. So does everybody know what two-factor is, by the way? Yes. Such as? Yep. Excellent. All right. Yep. What do you want? Milky Way, Snickers, Twix, Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers. Yes. Excellent. That's going to take somebody else. Okay, so let's give these creds a try, and you'll notice maybe something interesting if you can see the slide, and unfortunately it might be too small, but part of the username had ADMIN in the name, so if you want to guess. Yep. Okay. So here's some of the target stuff that was found. Something a regular user would see. So even having this level of access is interesting in Lotus because there's been some security issues with it. And oftentimes, and I've actually used this, if you can get a regular user and log in, you can actually grab every user's name and password hash. Everyone. That includes administrators. So there's the possibility of escalation there. In this case, though, we didn't need to do that because we were already administrator. So this is web administrative access using a particular URL. This is hard to see, and if anybody can, then please answer the questions. If not, I understand. I'll just run through it. But do you see any problems after looking at this information? So it's got things like the server name, host name, version and build, operating system, directory, server date and time, so forth. Do you see any issues with what that current information is? Yes. True. What about in particular that particular information, though? Is there something interesting about it? So what about the operating system? What does that say, since you can probably read it on the front row there? 2003. Okay, what's wrong with 2003? It's about to go unsupported. Yep. So in July 2015, bye-bye 2003. So they're real close to, having to change to a supported system. Also, there's another issue here too. The version of Lotus is at 8, and the current version is actually 9. Okay, so an interesting thing that Lotus gives you, if you have administrator access, is some operating system console accesses. There's 2. We'll just look at one of them called Quick Console. So, you know what I do when I see some functionality like this that a piece of software gives you? Yeah. So if you can't see that, by the way, here's one of the commands you can do through Quick Console. So it gives you operating system level access, but it's blind. It's a blind type of access, so it doesn't immediately return the output to you. So you have to do a little trick. So you can overcome it by sending output to files and then going through the website through a browser and accessing those files. So that's essentially what this command's doing. So one of my questions is, well, first of all, how do we secure something like this? Like if they've got this set up, like how would we secure this functionality? Well, yes. Disable, right? Disable. Disable that particular option. Possible. I actually haven't looked into Lotus to see if you could do that. So another question is, why does this functionality even exist? Like, why do these products give you like all this functionality like that? Is it really needed? Is it a convenience thing? Just for convenience? Do you really need like operating system console access through like Lotus, management?
Yes.
But
they wanted to help you on your pen test.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, they have something to market to the CIOs.
Yes. Somebody could have requested it, obviously, so yeah, it could be an upgrade. Yeah. But, so we... Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we see this all the time in software, like this additional functionality that definitely helps us as pen testers. This is just an example of output where I actually enumerated local accounts on the system and read the file. So I did that through Quick Console, sent it to a file, and then read that file, and that just shows the local users. But let's do something a little more interesting. If I can get my thing. So one thing we can do is set up an anonymous FTP site, create an FTP initialization file, and we can download something like, say, Metasploit's Meterpreter payload. I'll blow this up a little bit and show you. So that's essentially what we're doing through the Quick Console. We're creating an ftp.ini file, which is our initialization file, and when we kick it off of that last command, that's basically it'll run that file. So we're setting up the commands. We're going to an anonymous FTP site, we're getting an executable, and we're done, and then we execute those instructions. Okay, this is the actual execution of the file, and we're basically lowering the boom, so we called it boom.exe. It's a reverse payload meterpreter, and it's executing on the victim's machine. Now, when we're able to do that, we can do all kinds of nasty things. So we're basically reaching out to the internet, and we're connecting to our waiting site on port 8080. And then we get a little information once we've established a session to it. So we can do lots of interesting commands with Metasploit's Meterpreter. Yes. Mimikatz is incorporated. It's one of those things that's incorporated into Metasploit. So, question for you, and this might be worth a book. So that get UID command, and it returns nt-authority/system. The question is that, so when we see that, we love that. Like that's like awesome. We're like, oh, yes. The question is that the highest level privilege that you can get on a Windows system? No? What's the, whoever said that, is there more information? That's true, he did answer the question, but not to my satisfaction. Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah, very good. Is that worthy of the book? All right. Black Hat Python or practice network security monitoring? Python. All right. Essentially, this is the highest level privilege. So when pen testers get this, they do their happy dance. Okay, so what's the next thing we might do? Well, in this case, we created a port proxy to access the system, the target system, using RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol. And there it is. There's our RDP access to the victim system, the victim machine. The next step is basically, well, we got on this machine, and we have administrative level. What else can we do? Well, let's pivot through the system. So we're on the internet, right? And we've hit this external system. Let's pivot through and see what other machines we can access. Let's see what our environment is that this machine is connected to. So in this case, the machine was not on a domain, which is, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but that's what the ending of this story is, domain admin access. So, but that machine wasn't part of the domain. However, as we pivoted through, we were able to do this thing. Now, what's this? This is a dump of the domain and local passwords on a different system, on an accessible system. So we use a tool called Windows Credential Editor, or WCE. And so this was actually performed on a different machine, but within the same, if you want to call it subnet, Class C subnet. So it was a 10.10.1.116. Okay? So I got a couple questions for you. So just based on, if you can see the slide, what kind of quality of passwords do these look like good passwords for the most part? Terrible? Yeah. Terrible. Yeah, not very good passwords. So my next question is this is going to be worth a book. So how was I able to get here? So I'll give you a hint. It was back on a couple of slides. So, and I threw out the IP address of this machine, 10.10.1.116. So does anybody have a guess as to how I got here? Right. But why? Yeah. So the issue I'll get at, let me go back a couple slides. So look at the IP addresses of this machine. So the if config gives you the current machine IP address, or addresses in this case. So with this hint, and it's 10.10.1.25 and 10.10.126. So how was I able to get to that other machine? Same subnet. Absolutely. What's the problem there? This machine was not in a DMZ. It was attached to their internal network. Oops. Yikes. So we do see this. You're supposed to create DMZs, right? Just for this case, to not let, attackers do what we did. So, I think this is one of the final ones, if not the final, close to it. Final slide. So this is the access of their domain controller as a domain administrator. So we took a pastebin entry, fairly obscure, and went all the way and compromised their entire network. So here's a reference to some of the information that I used in the Lotus environment. I have some copies of these, by the way. I have 2 or 3 up here if you're interested. This was actually done by a Russian guy who's really good. I enjoy reading his white papers, and I typically, white papers dry, yuck. But this guy is really good. So he's done a number of white papers, and I think he's currently beating up on SAP systems. That's where his attention's focused. But if you get a chance, just go out there and see what he's got. It's good stuff. Some of it may be relevant to your environment if Lotus is not. So what kind of lessons learned do we have through this? So do you see any value in having pen testing done? After looking at this, would automated tools have caught this? So there was ways to break the exploit chain as well, but because of just a series of mistakes or functionality, intended functionality, they got pwned. So Yep. So just good fundamental security. You know, why did somebody throw that pastebin entry up there? I don't know. One programmer was wanting the others to access the, you know, their system, and they were having trouble or whatever. Right. Yep. Help. Right. Just trying to be helpful. Good point. Yep. Screw him. Like, yep. And he just put it out for all his buddies, internet buddies. Yep. And of course the company didn't find it. They didn't know about it. How long from soup to nuts did it take? Typically, I mean, so we don't necessarily completely concentrate on one thing at a time. We've got multiple assessments going on, but so I mean that was, you know, a day, or, you know, yeah. I mean, yep. Anybody else? So typically we're noisy just because we can be. But how many exploits did you see that were done in that? Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. So proper logging. Look for anomalous stuff like that. Yep. 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 And, you know, most people, if they run an IDS, IPS, or whatever, like, so what was the issue there? So I was legit from the start. Now, I happen to be coming from an IP that should have been suspect, but very, very difficult once you acquire, yeah, legitimate accounts. And yep. Yes, except that box wasn't actually it wasn't part of the DMZ. It was on the internal network. That was their internal network was the DMZ. Yep. Yes. Yes. And oftentimes companies do make mistakes where they do have a DMZ and they'll put machines in their DMZ, but then somebody who knows, you know, like, oh, let's just open this up just for I'm testing or whatever, and then they forget, they leave it open, and yeah, mistakes are made. So, any other questions? Nope. Okay. Thank you.